looking at hearing loss and Aboriginal employment. And this is based on some work I did on the Tiwi Islands last year, where we looked at several work groups as to what the prevalence of hearing loss was and what was associated with that hearing loss. Firstly, we found that 60% of the Aboriginal workers in those work groups had some degree of significant hearing loss, significant enough to affect their communication in the workplace. And firstly, they had lower overall work performance, they had more difficulties in following verbal instructions, they had lower proficiency in oral English, were slower on learning on the job, were often more shy, were more often defensive and got angry if their work was corrected, and they were less able to work independently. In terms of social and emotional well-being, the workers with hearing loss experienced more frustration at work, more anxiety and worry in particular about difficulties with communication, and many of them experienced more depression as well. And they as a group had the lowest literacy levels, and not only the lowest literacy levels, they were often actively avoiding engagement in literacy programs that replicated the kinds of things that they did at school where they'd already failed. So the literacy programs that were being provided weren't being effective for many of them because they didn't want to go there. They didn't want to engage in that process that they'd already failed because the literacy support didn't take into consideration those listening problems and also the social outcomes of those listening problems in terms of anxiety and low confidence. In terms of relationships with supervisors, the workers who the supervisors found it most difficult to relate to were invariably those who had some degree of hearing loss. This wasn't all people with hearing loss, but those people who the supervisors found it difficult to relate to, particularly non-Aboriginal supervisors, were the ones with hearing loss. And those workers, and there were remarkably few social problems in these workplaces. People generally got on very well together, but all of those who didn't were people who had hearing loss. In terms of what sorts of things that you can do in this situation, a lot of the problems are not solely related to the workers and what they can do. Very often it's the acoustic environment, the attitudes of the people who they're working with, and the communication skills of those who are working with students or teaching them or providing a service to them that are absolutely the key for better outcomes for people with hearing loss. So this is very much a shared problem. This isn't an issue of let's do something with the Aboriginal workers or the Aboriginal students or the Aboriginal clients alone. This is what can agencies and individuals do to improve their communication or the acoustic environment or the support to clients to get better outcomes. Firstly, acoustics is hugely important. Good acoustics helps everyone to hear better, but particularly those people with hearing loss are going to be more adversely affected by poor acoustics. And that good acoustics is that the signal that is being listened to is loud enough to hear, that there's a low level of background noise and little reverberation or echo. And even now, the buildings that are being created for use in remote communities often are atrocious in terms of acoustics. I recently visited a remote community that had a brand new training centre that had been purpose-built. And it was one large room with no ceiling, just a roof that sound bounced off the metal roof and created echoes.